So as we start the very last section of this semester, it's called Gaussian elimination. And as it indicates, you're going to be eliminating things. And to do this, you have to have row operations. So these are the 3 row operations you can have. So you can interchange 2 rows, you can multiply a row by a number, or you can add 2 rows together. So I have given you a handout to go along with this video. So you're not going to have room to work these out on this piece of paper, but that way you at least have all the directions in front of you so you can see what it's asking for. So for this first one, and some of these are not done in order, but this is number 1. And the first thing this wants us to do is write this as an augmented matrix. So this is one of the simplest things to do. The first column will be the coefficients on z. So this is a 1. Well, there's not a z and there's not a z, so those are zeros. So then I scoot over 1 column, and now I need the coefficients on the r's. So that's a -1, a +1, and a 3. Then I move over to the 3rd row, and we need the coefficients in front of y. So that's going to be 3, -1, -2. And then for this equal sign, some teachers will put a line there, others will put a dotted line. Sometimes there won't be a line at all. So if there's not a line, don't worry with that. You can put it on your piece of paper. So this leaves me with my constants to the right of 350, 300, and 400. And that is the answer for this question. It's not asking you to do any row operations. It just wants you to be able to take a set of systems of equations and create this augmented matrix. Number 2 is doing the exact same thing. So just because the variables have changed does not mean that the process of what you do changes. So for my x coefficients, I have 4, 2, 5. For my r's, I have +5, -1, and +1. For my u's, I have -4, -4, -3. And again, the line may or may not be there. And your constants over here to the right are 104, -54, -129. So this would be my augmented matrix. Again, when it's asking this, it doesn't want you to do anything with it. So now I've skipped to number 5, and what this one wants you to do is to rewrite this as a set of ordered pairs. We're going to use x, y, and z. So I have -5x, I have +2x, I have +2x, I have +6y, -2y, and -y. I have +3z, -1z, and -1z. And these is the equal sign, and notice that there's no line there. So that gives me 250, 300, and 100. And then I've skipped to number 10. This question has 3 parts to it, and kids always get a little bit confused because they think that when to do B, you have to use your answer from A, and that's not what happens. So we are going to take row 3 and multiply it by -4, and then we're going to add that to row 2. So what I'm going to do is this. This is just row 3. So I'm taking row 3 and I'm multiplying it by -4. So that's going to give me a 4, a -24, +8, and -3. So that's how row 3 is going to change. And then we want to add that to row 2. So row 2 is -3, +3, -4, and +5. So the answer that you type in is what happens after you add those together. So if I have 4 minus 3, that's 1. -24 plus 3 is -21. 8 plus a -4 is 4. And -3 plus 5 is the number 2. So you are making these intermediate changes in this row. So that's showing me that it's R3 by -4. So I've changed row 3. And then I'm adding that to row 2. So this is what row 2 will now change into. So this is an important process because you're going to be doing this for the rest of these examples. All right, so for B part, you are going to interchange row 2 and 3. So row 1 stays just like it is. So I got 4, 1, -6, -1. Now row 3 is going to move up to row 2. So that's -1, 6, -2, -3. So row 2 has to go down and be row 3 now. So this is -3, 3, -4, and 5. And you would type this in. Now on this first one, I'm sorry, I didn't change this. So row 2 is the only row that changed, so you have 4, 1, -6, -1. Row 2 is this that I have boxed in as the new line that goes there. And then row 3 does not change. Now, I know we multiplied it by -4, but the row itself does not have any changes when you type in that matrix. So this would be your answer, the full matrix. So for B part, this would be your answer, it's the full matrix. So for C part, it wants you to take row 2 and multiply it by 5. So row 1 is going to stay just like it is. So I have 4, 1, -6, -1. Now I'm going to take that row 2 and multiply it by +5. So I have -15, +15, -20, and +25. And then row 3 is unchanged. I didn't do anything to it, so that changes in no way. So this would be my final answer that I would type in online. Now the rest of what we have to do take lots of paper because we have to do one step at a time, so be prepared. So when you are told to solve these and it's in a matrix, you have to use Gaussian elimination, and it's going to always make the comment that you need to find reduced row echelon form or just reduced echelon form. So what that form does is put a 1 in this location and then zeros beneath it. That's your first step. Second step is to get a 1 here and put zeros above and below. And lastly, you're going to put a 1 here and you're going to have zeros above it. Now, with what happens over here, you're going to have numbers that change as you go through and make those things happen where you have the 1s and the zeros. And how you'll dedicate your answer is the first column is X equals, and you'll have whatever number is in this location. Then we have a 1 in the second column, so that's a Y equals, and that'll be whatever number is here. And lastly, you have a Z, and you end up with whatever number is here. So it'll have X, Y, Z equals individually, or it'll ask you what the solution is, and you'll do the order triple X, Y, Z. So the order in which you do this is very important, and you have to go very slowly. This video might be something that you want to pause between steps and see if you can come up with the right answer. This is not the easiest thing to do, but again, you're not going to have to deal with it after your test and your exam. So be very cautious about what you do with these and take them slowly. So the very first thing we do for number 3 is look to see if I have a 1 right here. And it's great because I do. All right, so now my goal in the first step is to make a 0 appear right there. Well, I can't do that by adding 1 to 2 because that won't work. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is multiply 2 times row 1, and I'm going to add that to row 2. So row 2 is going to be the one that changes. So I maintain row 1 just like it is. So I have 1, 1, 2, and 4. And at this point, you can decide whether you want to do this on scratch paper or if you can do it mentally. I don't need to see the scratch paper. So some kids like to do this multiplication up above this. So if I do that, I get 2, 2, 4, and 8. And now I'm going to be adding it to row 2. So I have 2 minus 2, that gives me a 0. I have 2 minus 1, that's 1. I have 4 minus 2, that's 2. And then I have 8 minus 5, which is 3. So that transformation has happened. Now, once I have that, I'm going to erase these numbers because now I've got to put a 0 in this location. Again, I'm using row 1 to do this. So I have that 1 that's already up there. So I'm going to have to take 5 times row 1. So let's go ahead and do that up above it. So I have 5, 5, 10, and 20. And now what I'm doing is now adding that to row 3. So row 3 is going to be the only one that changes. So I have 5 minus 5 is 0. I have 5 minus 3 is 2. I have 10 minus 6 is 4, and 20 minus 14 gives me a 6. So this first column is exactly what I need it to be. And again, once I finish, so I don't get confused, I'm going to erase these numbers so I don't write the wrong number in the wrong place. So now that this first column's done, now I turn my sights to getting a 1 in this location. So I already have a 1. So the next thing I have to do is come up with a 0 in this location. So I'm going to extend my arrow down here. All right, I'm going to try to keep this on one screen for you so I'm not shifting to the right every time. So the way I'm going to do that is to take row 2 and multiply it by -1, and then I'm going to add that to row 1. So again, I'm going to write up above it. Okay, now because I'm multiplying row 2 by something, row 2 will be unchanged. So you're going to go ahead and write that row in there, and then we're going to do our multiplication. So if I multiply, I would have -1 times 0, of course, is 0. Then we're going to have -1 times 1 is -1. -1 times 2 is -2. And then I have -1 times 3 is -3. Now, I'm going to add that to row 1. So I have 0 underneath plus 1 that's at the top stays a 1. Then if I have -1 plus 1, that turns into a 0. Then I have -2 plus 2. Well, that's a 0, so that's a happy coincidence. And then I have -3 plus 4, which gives me a 1. So once I have row 1 fixed, I'm going to erase these numbers. And now my sights are turned to where I need to get a 0 right there. Well, to do that, I'm going to have to take -2 times row 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write those numbers underneath. So -2 times 0 is 0. -2 times 1 is -2. -2 times -2 times +2 is -4. And then -2 times 3 is -6. And now we're going to add that to row 3. So row 3 is the only one that's going to change. So I add the 0 that's outside the matrix plus the 0 that's in the matrix, and that stays a 0. Then I have -2 plus 2. That becomes a 0. I have -4 plus 4. That's a 0. And then I have -6 plus 6 gives me a 0. And something very special happens right here. And I'm going to erase these numbers so I don't get lost in it. So what happens is when you get this bottom row of numbers, that means that there are infinitely many solutions. Now, just like with your solving of the systems of equations from earlier, this one has much the same direction for you, that it tells you how to write this answer. So if you look on your sheet of paper, you have to, number 3, says express it in terms of z. All right, so because that line is all zeros, and it tells me to write it in terms of z, then that means that z is equal to z. Now, and I know you've noticed it already, but I always put a line through my z's so they don't look like 2's. All right, so then at the top line, I have that x is equal to 1. So what happens in this middle row is that the second column is y, the last column is z, and that's equal to 3. So when I type this in, x is 1. I solve this for y, just like we had to do before. So I get y is equal to 3 minus 2z. And this is what goes in to this ordered triple as your y value. And then you have a z as your z. Now, it's a little odd that you have one number that worked out, but that can happen. So this is a special case. I wanted to get it out of the way first because it's a little bit shorter. That should happen fairly quickly if you're going to have that happen because you have multiples of the same numbers. So let's move on to the next one. So as I look at this one, my first thing that I need to do is try to make sure that I get a 1 right there. Well, 2 is not 1, -2 is not 1, but I'm noticing that this is very interesting because that has a 1 in that location. So the first thing we're going to do is interchange those two rows. So I'm going to have 1, 3, 1, 150. I'm going to leave the second line just like it is. and then put the top into the bottom location. So I have -2, -6, -3, 100. So that transformation can happen first, and that actually makes my life a little simpler. All right, so the next thing I need to check is that this is a 0, and it is, so I don't have to calculate anything for that. And then the next thing I need to do is get a 0 right there. In order to make that happen, I'm going to have to take 2 times row 1. So I haven't left myself room, so I'll write kind of small. 2 times, 1 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. And if I double 150, I end up with 300. Now we're going to be adding that to row 3. So row 3 is the only one that's going to change. So I can go ahead and recopy the top 2. I have 1, 3, 1, 150. I have 0, 1, 1, 300. And now I'm going to add the numbers that I have outside written above to the bottom row. So I have 2 plus a -2 is 0. 6 plus a -6 is 0. And we would love it if that would keep going and be zeros, but that's not what happens. We have 2 minus 3 is -1. And then we have 300 plus 100 is 400. So now we are using this new matrix, and we are looking at the fact that this is a 1, which makes us happy. I'm looking down here because that's a 0, and that makes me happy. So the only other one we have to deal with is this one. So again, I'm going to try to not move this around too much. So for the next one, I need to take row 2 and multiply it by -3. So -3 times row 2. So I'll do those above. 0 times -3 is 0. -3 times 1 is -3. -3 times 1 is -3. And if I take 300 times -3, that's -900. So now we're going to add that to row 1. So that means only row 1 is changing. So I can recopy the bottom 2 because those are not going to change. So they stay just like they are. And now I take the numbers above that matrix and add it to the first row. So 0 plus 1 is 1. -3 plus 3 is 0. I have -3 plus 1 is -2. And I have -900 plus 150 is going to give me -750. So the next thing I need to do is make this into a +1. And the way I'm going to do that is to multiply that row by -1. And I'm going to do this very quickly by just changing these signs. So this will become a positive and 400 will become negative. All right, so now we are turning to where we have that 1 that we need right here. So now I need to get a 0 right here, and I will also eventually need to get the -2 to turn into a 0. So we're going to do these one at a time. So the third row is what I'm using, so it's not going to change. 0, 0, 1, -400 is going to stay, Now I'm going to take a -1 times row 3. So that's 0, 0, -1, -400, positive 400. And we're going to add that to row 2. So row 2 is going to be the one changing this time. So I have 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is still 1. -1 plus 1 now becomes 0. And I have 400 plus 300 is going to give me 700. So now we are ready to look at creating a 0 up here. So again, I'm using row 3 to do that. So I'm going to erase all of these numbers so we don't get those confused. So I'm going to take that bottom row 3, I'm going to multiply it by +2. So 2 times row 3. So 0 times 2 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. And if I take -400 and I multiply it by 2, I get -800. So now we're going to add this to row 1 to finalize our reduced row echelon form. So I have 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus negative 2 is 0. And negative 400 plus negative, so negative 800 plus a negative 750 is negative 1550. So this finalizes my row echelon form. So again, this first column is X, the second column is Y, the third column is Z. X is equal to negative 1550, Y is equal to 700, and Z is equal to negative 400. And you may have to write that as an ordered triple. It may just have X equals Y equals Z equals. So here's another one that's a 3 by 4. So the first thing we need is a 1 at the top, and to do that, I'm just going to interchange and put the third row on top and keep the second row just like it is, and then the top row goes to the bottom. So now I have my 1 that is here. I already have the 0 beneath it, so I turn my sights to this. I need to create a 0 where the 5 is. To do that, I'm going to do negative 5 times row 1. So I'm going to do that up above it. So I have negative 5. 0 times negative 5 is 0. Negative 5 times 1 is also negative 5. And 200 times negative 5 is negative 1,000. And then we're going to add that to row 3. What that means is row 1 and row 2 stay unchanged. So I'm going to write all those down because I don't have to change anything there. So as I look at the third row, I have negative 5 plus 5 gives me a 0. I have 0 plus negative 2 is negative 2. I have negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. And I have negative 1,000 plus 100 is negative 900. So then I have a 1 in the second column, second row. I have a 0 up above it, so that part's good. So now I'm looking at negative 2. I need to change that into a 0. So I'm going to take the second row and multiply it by 2. So 2 times row 2. I'm going to do this up above. So I have 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 0 is 0. And if I double 350, I end up with 700. And now we're going to add that to row 3. So row 3 is the only one that's going to change. I keep the top row and the middle row just as they are. And now we add. So we have 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus negative 2 is also 0. I have 0 plus negative 1 is negative 1. And then I have 700 minus 900. So I have negative 200. The last thing I'm looking at is this needs to be positive 1. So we multiply that row by a negative, which changes this sign to a positive and this sign to a positive. And the last thing we have to concern ourselves with is that this needs to be a 0. To do that, we need to take negative 1 times row 3. So that's a 0, 0. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And 200 times negative 1 is negative 200. And we're going to add that to row 1. So row 1 is the only one changing. Recopy the others because they will not be changing. And then we add the numbers to the outside with the top row. So I have 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And then negative 200 plus 200 would also be 0. And again, we have our reduced row echelon. So I have X here, Y here, Z here. So X is 0, Y is 350, and Z is going to be 200. For this next one, we have a 1 in the first spot that we need it in. So we are going to change this into a 0. In order to do that, we are going to take negative 3 times row 1, which I'm going to write above it. So I'm going to have negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. And negative 3 times 150 is negative 450. So now we're going to add that to row 2. So it is going to be changing. Row 1 will not be changing. So I rewrite row 1, 1, 0, 0, 150. So then we add the top numbers to the second row. So I have -3 plus 3 is a 0. 0 plus 1 is a 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. And -450 plus 200 is going to give us -250. Now we are concerning ourselves with making sure that this -5 also becomes a 0. So the way we're going to do that is to erase these numbers up above and reset ourselves. So we're going to do 5 times row 1. So let's do that up above it. I have 5, 0, 0, and then 5 times 150 is 750. And then we are going to take those numbers and add them to row 3. So row 3 is the only other one that's going to change. So I have 5 plus a -5 gives me 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. And then I have 750 plus 300 is 1050. So in that short step, we have x equals 150. We have y is equal to -250. And we have z is equal to 1050. Only 2 more examples. This one is the most complicated because it has no zeros where we might need them. So this one is going to take a few more steps. So if you're near the bottom of a page, you may want to flip that over. All right, so the first thing we need, of course, is a 1 here, which we have. I need a 0 here. So we're going to do that by taking row 1 and adding it to row 2. So row 1 is going to stay just like it is. So row 1 plus row 2. So row 1 stays unchanged at this stage. And then we add that to row 2. So 1 plus a -1, -2 plus 3, 1 minus 3, and -3 plus 6. So now we need to create a 0 here. So for this one, I'm going to have to multiply row -1 times row 1. So that's a -1, +2, -1, +3. And then we're going to add that to row 3. So -1 plus 1 is 0. 2 plus a -1, or 2 minus 1 is 1. -1 minus 1 is -2. And 3 plus 0 is 3. So now we're moving on. We have a 1 here, which is good. So we need to get a 0 up here, and we'll also need a 0 below it. So let's do this one step at a time. Let's erase these numbers so we don't get confused or look back and think, what did we do that for? So we're going to erase as we go. So for this next step, we're going to take 2 times row 2. Write this up above. So 0 times 2 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times -2 is -4. And then 2 times 3 is going to give me a 6. So I'm going to take those outside numbers and I'm going to add them to row 1. So row 1 is going to change. Row 2 won't change at all in this step. So rewrite it just like it is, because that will not be changing. Now I take the top numbers and add them to row 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. -2 plus 2 is 0. I have 1 minus 4, or -4 plus 1 is -3, and then 6 minus 3 is 3. So now we are looking at creating a 0 here. So erase those numbers up above. And we reset ourselves so that now we need to take row 2, multiply it by -1 times row 2. So let's put this up above. So I have -1 times 0, I have -1 times 1, I have -1 times -2, and then I have -1 times 3. Now I'm going to take those outside numbers and I'm going to add them to row 3. So 0 plus 0 is 0, -1 plus 1 is 0, 2 minus 2 is 0, and -3 plus 3 is 0. So here again, we have the information that z is equal to z, and we have infinitely many solutions. Since the directions say to write it as z, then you're going to start with z equals z. Now this one is a little more complicated than the other one that we did. So if you look at this top line, I have x plus 3z, minus 3z, is equal to 3. So to get the x component, you'll solve for x. So you have x is equal to 3 plus 3z. And then go down to the second one, and you have y minus 2z is equal to 3. So you're going to solve that for y. So you get y is equal to 3 minus 2z, plus 2z. So as you write this one in, this one will require an ordered triple. So your x value is 3 plus 3z. Your y value is 3 plus 2z. And your final is just z itself. So this is the last example I'm going to be doing with you. So the first thing we want is for the top line to be a positive 1. Since it's a negative 1, the first thing I'm going to do is just multiply by negative 1. So this would become a positive, this would become a positive, and the other two would become negatives. Okay, you can interchange if you want to. I'm just going to leave them like this. Now, the next thing I need to do is put a 0 right here. So I'm going to accomplish that by taking negative 1 times row 1, which I'm going to put up above. So 1 times negative 1, 5 times negative 1, 5 times negative 5, and negative 1 times negative 38. All right, now we're going to add this to row 2. So again, I'm multiplying row 1 by something, so it's going to stay just like it is. And then as we add the outside numbers to the second row, I have negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Negative 5 minus 2 is negative 7. I have 5 minus 1 is 4. And 38 plus 13 is going to give me 51. Next thing I'm going to do is put a 0 here. So we're going to erase these top numbers. And we are going to have to take negative 7 times row 1. So negative 7 times 1, negative 7 times 5, negative 7 times negative 5, and negative 7 times 38. And now we're going to add this to row 3. So I have negative 7 plus 7. I have negative 35 minus 1. I have 35 minus 1. And then I have 266 plus 50. Now, here is the least favorite part for any part of this that students don't like, and that's why I saved it for last. You now have to create a 1 right here. And there's no way to do that by interchanging anything. So what I'm going to have to do next is to take negative 1/7 times row 2. So the top row stays 1, 5, negative 5, negative 38. The bottom row stays 0, negative 36, positive 34, and 316. Now, we are going to multiply row 2 by negative 1/7. So 0 times anything is 0. Negative 1/7 times negative 7 is 1. Then I have negative 1/7 times 4, so that's negative 4 over 7. And then I have negative 1/7 multiplied by 51. So this is negative 51 over 7. And that is not divisible by 7 nor reduced. So this is where this gets really ugly. And this is one of those examples where, or one of these problems where you probably want a spare sheet of paper to work on, because it's only going to get worse. So now that we have our 1 right here, now I need to get a 0 up here. In order to do that, I'm going to take negative 5 times row 2. So I'm going to put it underneath it. So row 2, I'm multiplying by negative 5. So that's 0 times negative 5 is 0. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. Now when I multiply a negative times a negative, it becomes positive, and this is 20 over 7. And then for the last one, I have a negative times a negative. And if I do 51 times 5, that is going to give me 255 over 7. So these are the numbers that I'm now going to add to row 1. So row 2 is going to stay just like it is. You can go ahead and recopy it because it's not going to change anywhere in this process. So we're going to leave those just like they are. And now we're going to add. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Negative 5 plus 5 is 0. Now, I'm going to do these underneath. You are probably going to do them on a spare sheet of paper. So I have 20 over 7, and I'm going to subtract 5 over 1. So I have to get a common denominator of 7. So this ends up being 20 over 7 minus 35 over 7. So this is going to be negative 15 over 7. And that's what will go here. Then I'm going to take 255 over 7. And I'm going to subtract 38 over 1. And again, I have to get a common denominator of 7. So this gives me 255 over 7. And then I'm subtracting 38 times 7 gives me 266, and that's over 7. So negative 266 plus 255 is going to give me negative 11 over 7. So that's what goes over here. So now that we have a 0 above, we are going to now focus on getting a 0 below. So we are going to take positive 36 times row 2. So writing these down below it, I have 0 times 36 is 0. I have 36 times 1 is 36. I have 36 times negative 4 over 7 is going to give me negative 144 over 7. And then I'm going to do 36 times negative 51, which gives me negative 1836 over 7. Now what we're going to do with that is add that to row 3. So 0 plus 0 is 0. 36 minus 36 is also 0. And then we're going to have negative 144 over 7, and we're going to add to that 34 over 1. So again, I have to get a common denominator of 7 over 7. So 34 times 7, this gives me negative 144 over 7 plus 238 over 7. So I subtract the tops, which gives me 94 over 7. So that number goes here. And then last but not least, we have negative 1836 over 7, and I'm going to add to that 316 over 1. Again, common denominator of 7. 316 times 7 is 2212. So I have negative 1836 plus this over 7. So subtracting those two from each other gives me 376 over 7. Lots and lots of fractions. So we only have one more column to fix. So now I'm looking at changing this into a 1. So in order to do that, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I multiply 7 over 94 times row 3. So row 1 and row 2 remain unchanged. So a 0 times 7 over 94, a 0 times 7 over 94. 94 over 7 times its reciprocal is 1. And then I'm going to have 7 over 94, and I'm going to multiply that by 376 over 7. So the 7's cancel, and then we multiply straight across. So 376 divided by 94, and miraculously, that's a whole number. You never thought it in a million years, but there it is, okay? Now, what's nice about these is you suffer through the middle with all the fractions, but at the end, it always works out for you. So we're going to erase this, and now we have the zeros to create up above. So we're going to make a 0 right here. In order to do that, we're going to take positive 4 over 7 times row 3. So this gives me a 0 times 4 over 7, a 0 times 4 over 7, 1 times 4 over 7, and then I have 4 times 4 over 7, so that's 16/7. And we're going to add that to row 2. So row 3 is going to remain unchanged. I'm going to recopy it just like it is. So I have 0, 0, 1, and 4. And then I'm going to do this addition. So I have 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. 4/7 minus 4/7 is 0. And then I have 16 over 7 minus 51 over 7. So the denominators are already the same. And then when I go to subtract that, I get negative 35 over 7. And we know that that is going to be negative 5. So again, miraculous. So now, last but not least, very last step in this problem, we have to get a 0 here. So in order to do that, we're going to take positive 15 over 7 times row 3. So 0 times anything, 0 times anything. All right, 1 times 15 over 7 is positive 15 over 7. And then I have 15 over 7. So we multiply this by 4 over 1, which gives us 60 over 7. So I'm going to erase this out of our way. And we are going to add to row 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 0 is 0. 15/7 minus 15/7 is 0. And then I'm going to have 60 over 7, and I'm going to subtract 11 over 7. So if I take 60 minus 11, we're going to end up with 49 over 7, and there we go. So at this point, we have our answer finalized. I'm going to erase all this excess. And we're going to have the final answer as x equals 7, y equals negative 5, and z is equal to 4. See me with questions.